Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. This is Boris Tsizangausen with you. Today is July 25th. Here are the main news stories at this moment. So, the entire internet is filled with footage of fires at Wildberries warehouses, Ukrainian drones flying, and videos of Russians crying, outraged, telling how they lost their businesses. Some are even planning to leave Russia. But you know what's most interesting? On Russia's Channel 1, not a single word was said about the attacks on the Wildberries warehouses. Not a word. Warehouses were attacked in several regions. Not a word. After all, the attacks directly affected hundreds of thousands of Russians. And on Channel 1, silence. Instead, on Channel 1, viewers are told about Russian army strikes on Ukraine, and events in the Middle East are covered. Russophobia in the Baltic countries is one of the main topics. A blackout in Georgia, and the successes of Russian scientists. Everything is wonderful, everything is going according to plan. Record pig iron production, no problems with fuel. And they also showed Putin's visit to the Irkutsk aircraft factory. So fasten your seatbelts, we're about to have a session of concentrated craziness. Before showing this epic video some background, Putin arrived at the Irkutsk aircraft factory, where he called on his old friend Sergei Chemezov, who, by the way, is also the head of Rostec, to increase the range of the Russian counterpart to the foreign MC-21 aircraft. You know what's even more interesting? The design of this aircraft began back in 2007, and the start of mass production has been postponed 8 times. It still hasn't gone into mass production, but now Rostec somehow needs to increase the range of an aircraft that doesn't even exist yet. By the way, in the video clip, Chemezov himself says to Putin, well, the plane doesn't exist yet. But of course, that part was cut out of all the news reports. But I found the full video. Let's watch it.
Путин ознакомился с производством первых 18-серийных МС-21.
Укороченная версия, да? Это укороченная версия. У нас дальность полета будет какая?
Не менее 5000.
Не менее 5000. Сюда будет 5000.
Ну, желательно.
Это нет, должно быть больше.
Да, будем работать.
Да, явно должно быть больше. Укороченная.
Мы двигатели оставляем те же самые, вес будет машины меньше.
Ну да.
И так дальше. Но пока еще машин-то нет.
Пока на этапе опор.
Chemezov says, but the plane doesn't exist yet. What range is there to increase? And Putin asks, what's the range? 5,000? It needs to be more, it needs to be increased. Make it 5 million. He's just absolutely out of his mind. To change the range, even if it's for a non-existent plane, you'd have to change the key design parameters. That is, you'd have to change the engines, maybe add extra fuel tanks, find space for them, and figure out what to do about the weight. And in the end, by how much should it be increased? Putin says, increase it. On the other hand, of course, you can change whatever you want. The plane still won't appear anyway. Every year, Putin will come and say, so, how many passengers then? 140? Make it 20,000 seats. And they salute him, we'll do it. We'll need another 50 or 500 billion in 20 years. Just so you understand, Chemezov is of course a unique character. It was he who in 2013 presented Medvedev with the first Russian smartphone. Let me show you this epic video clip. Just listen to what he says in this video. Take a look.
Но с тех пор на меня просто обрушилось большое количество обращений. Говорит, где этот самый российский смартфон? Как я понимаю, вы его сделали.
Это первый у нас смартфон российский, который мы создали. Это стопроцентно российское изобретение. Здесь у нас...
А детали?
Детали, к сожалению, иностранные. И сборку пока мы ведем в Сингапуре, но...
By following that exact same line of logic, a high-end Mercedes would also have to be considered a Russian car, wouldn't it? The parts are only foreign and the assembly is done abroad. By the way, how is that Russian smartphone doing these days? Has everyone in Russia switched to it after 13 years? No? I wonder why. Do you know why? Because the company that created this smartphone went bankrupt and Rostec pulled out of the project. See how it turned out. But Chemezov and Putin have a little secret of their own. Why is everything forgiven for Chemezov and Rostec? We'll talk about that a bit later. But for now, let me remind you, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. It's important for the channel's growth. You can do it right now, no need to wait. And of course, everyone who subscribes to this channel will have soft and silky hair. So make sure to subscribe. So basically, they mastered billions. By the way, Chemezov has been running Rostec for 19 years without interruption. Let's list the achievements during this time. The Yotaphone disappeared, the extremely expensive Armata tank turned out to be unfit for war. The MC-21 airplane that Putin inspected, the import-substituted Superjet, the Ka-62 helicopter, the Baikal airplane, all the deadlines keep getting pushed further and further back. Everything is shrouded in uncertainty. But unlike the deadlines for his projects, Chemezov has remained in his position since 2007. So why is everything forgiven him? There's a little secret, well, not even a secret, really. Essentially, Chemezov is one of the oldest members of Putin's inner circle, a former colleague, neighbor, and family acquaintance from the days of the GDR. In Dresden, he and Putin lived in the same building and often interacted. In fact, Chemezov even arrived in the GDR 2 years earlier. According to legend, he was a representative of the Soviet association Lush. Well, we all know perfectly well who he really was. Putin arrived in Dresden 2 years later, so according to Chemezov, there was a small Soviet intelligence group operating there, consisting of about 7 people. How does he know that? Let me quote Chemezov. "We worked together, lived next door, celebrated holidays together. How could we not become close and become friends?" He was talking about Putin. And in one of the interviews, Chemezov even made a slip and said the following about Putin: "We lived in the same building, interacted both at work and as neighbors." Well, that's exactly why everything is forgiven to Chemezov. By the way, when Putin says we don't abandon our own, he's talking about people like Chemezov. "We don't abandon our own" refers to the Rotenberg brothers, Kovalchuk, Timchenko, Sechin, Miller, and certainly not to ordinary Russians or anyone else. By the way, in Irkutsk, along the route of Putin's visit to the plant, the authorities put up last year's gasoline prices at gas stations, according to outraged local residents. Well, these are pure Potemkin villages, just in a modern version. It's simply astonishing. It seems to me that it's already obvious to any reasonable person that nothing is going according to plan. Russia won't capture Donbass by the end of the summer or even by the end of the year. But a few dozen more warehouses will definitely burn down, hundreds of thousands of Russians will go bankrupt, and the logistics of the entire country will simply collapse into the abyss. Add to this, by the way, a significant increase in prices for various groups of goods, which is already happening. And we still don't know what Ukraine will start burning after the Wildberries warehouses and after the oil refineries. There will be more about that a bit later. By the way, friends, let me remind you that Ukraine is accomplishing an incredible feat, asymmetrically breaking the gigantic military machine of the Russian Federation. Unbelievable. This will simply go down in every history textbook. In every episode, we have an important fundraiser for the defense forces of Ukraine. And today we are continuing to raise funds for a vehicle for the fighters of the 1st Separate Assault Regiment, named after hero of Ukraine, Dmytro Kotsiubailo, the legendary Da Vinci. Our soldiers are fighting in the Zaporizhzhia direction and have recorded a video message for you. Please take a look.
Вітаємо здоров'я. Ми, бійці підрозділу радіоелектронної боротьби 1-го окремого штурмового полку імені Героя України Дмитра Коцюбайла Да Вінчі, знову звертаємося до вас, пане Борисе, до ваших підписників за допомогою у зборі коштів на ремонт нашої автомобільної техніки. Будемо щиро вдячні кожному вашому донату, адже кожний ваш донат – це важливий крок до перемоги. Разом ми велика сила, разом ми Україна. Слава Україні! Героям слава!
Let's help our warriors from the 1st Separate Assault Regiment named after the legendary Da Vinci. The link to donate is in the description of this video. There are monobank, private bank, and PayPal options for those who want to help from abroad. And there's a QR code in the corner for those watching me on other channels. Thank you so much for supporting our defenders. Today, drones attacked the Wildberries logistics complex in Yekaterinburg. Just for the record, that's 1,800 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. The strike hit the parking lot and an evacuation was carried out. The building itself has not been damaged so far. Well, it was a ranging shot. Let me remind you once again, if our drones have picked a target, that target is done for. Just ask TUAPS, they won't let me lie. But that's not all. Today, there was another strike on the Avatech plant in Kirov, a plant that manufactures components for Russian S-300 and S-400 systems, as well as components for Russian missiles and aviation. And that's 1,200 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. Yesterday, this plant was attacked by Flamingo missiles, and today, by the way, some details have emerged. The missile pierced the roof of one of the production workshops. Its warhead detonated with a delayed fuse already inside the building. This led to an internal explosion and damage to expensive technological equipment. Another important point, before the strike, no evacuation of personnel from this plant was carried out. In general, it appears the strike happened during a work shift, and those who were making missiles to strike Ukraine just like that suddenly found themselves at a concert. You know whose? And besides, these were serious specialists. That's exactly where they belong, but that's not all. Today, drones also reached the Tyumen oil refinery. This is the former Antipinski, a huge plant. Its processing capacity is almost 9 million tons per year, making it one of the 20 largest oil refineries in Russia by processing volume. And that's a distance of 2,000 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. And now I see 1,500, 2,000, and soon our drones will be flying 3,000 kilometers. So hiding behind the Urals won't really work anymore for the Botox Medusa. By the way, I was just thinking about this Chemezov and all these Potemkin villages with their billions spent. And in a sense, the world is actually lucky that the Putin system is built not so much on efficiency as on personal loyalty and budget appropriation. And everyone is in on it, the whole cooperative. A significant portion of resources goes to corruption, the imitation of frantic activity, and endless breakthrough projects that exist for years only in presentations, but in reality don't physically exist. If Russia combined its resources with the Chinese model of strict party discipline and the inevitability of punishment for corruption, even for those in the closest circles, it would be a much more dangerous country. By the way, our drones also caused quite a stir in the Caspian Sea today. The strike hit vessels involved in the transshipment of military cargo between Iran and Russia, as well as a military ship. The fireworks were organized by the SBU, the Service of God, as we call it here. As a result of these strikes, first, an oil production platform at the Filonovsky field in the Caspian Sea was hit. Billions have been poured into it, and today our drones paid a visit to this platform. Hit targets include the cargo ship Port Olya 2 and the freighter Beiji. Both vessels are under international sanctions and were used to transport military cargo between Iran and Russia, and a Project 12,418 Molniya missile boat was also hit. In other words, the Sea of Azov has been almost completely cleared. They've gotten serious about the Black Sea and have moved on to the Caspian as well. Now, they're quickly going to wipe out both the oil platforms and the freighters there too. Ukraine is really showing what it's capable of, isn't it? What's going on here? They're relentlessly striking targets on Russian Federation territory in the seas. You in Russia will regret 100 times over that you came to Ukraine. And I have a feeling that with each passing day, more and more people in Russia are cursing the day Russia invaded Ukraine, especially now that it's hitting their own wallets. By the way, the State Duma has called on marketplaces to pay for their own drone protection. Well, really, why not? State Duma Deputy, General of the Alcoholic Troops, Andrei Gurulev, stated that marketplace owners should invest in protecting their own centers themselves. It all makes sense. Well, it seems absolutely clear to me. All the air defense systems have now been pulled in to protect one single Botox behind. There just aren't enough left for things like Wildberries or ozone. And Gurulev says, you guys handle it yourselves. We'll take care of ourselves, and you take care of yourselves. You know, I think they'll also start taking a cut from the sellers for warehouse protection, but in the end, Russians will end up paying for everything anyway. A little hint, this won't save anything. Protect it or not, everything will burn down anyway. Here's another statement from the Russian State Duma. State Duma Deputy Andrei Kolesnik from the Defense Committee stated that there will be no new wave of mobilization. Oh, we believe you, we really do. This is from the creators of, we're not going to attack Ukraine, we're not there. What else did they say? We don't need Ukrainian territory. There won't be a mobilization. That was the first part too. These are all from the same creators. I once came across a video compilation. Someone put together a montage of statements by Russian officials before the full-scale invasion. It included Lavrov, Peskov, and Zakharova all saying, "What are you talking about? An invasion? Are you out of your mind? That will never happen." This is even simpler. Putin simply has no other way out. He really has no other way out. More precisely, he has three options. The first is to end the war immediately, but as you understand, he won't do that. The second is to escalate the situation. And here there are two sub-options. Let's call them 2 and 3. The first way to escalate is to use weapons of mass destruction. And the second is to carry out mobilization. That's all he has left, as Trump says. Those are all the cards he has left. Obviously, he won't use nuclear weapons because then something will immediately hit his bald head. But as for throwing a few more 100,000 Russians in just to cover the occupied Donbas with corpses, maybe he'll try to do that. Maybe he'll try to seize it. That's how it is. Go ahead. The fact that essentially he will speed up the end, this doesn't bother him. He is convinced that he is winning. He truly believes that he is winning. And here's some news on the topic, by the way. In Russia, a record number of new funeral companies in 5 years has been registered. In the first half of this year, almost 1,000 new companies. That's 23% more than in the same period last year. As I understand it, the particularly enterprising people in Russia are getting ready. So if Putin does manage to gather up to 500,000 new cannon fodder somewhere and throws them into an assault, it will be the largest and most senseless disposal of Russians. And that's exactly why funeral agencies are now opening up. But Ukraine, despite all these efforts, this Botox squid twitching on strings over there, with a cool head is destroying logistics, oil refining, the Russian Federation's fleet, and now will start destroying something else as well. In other words, Ukraine is doing absolutely everything right. And we help our army, keep our minds cool, and don't lose heart. Ukraine will definitely win. And take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of your loved ones. Subscribe to this channel. Don't forget. Let's help our first Da Vinci Assault Battalion. The link to donate is in the description of this video. Have a peaceful day, everyone, and glory to Ukraine.